So this is one of the older murals in Tucson on South 10th Avenue, and it really highlights some of the dualities that are felt here in Tucson. In this area in particular, you can see both La Virgen de Guadalupe and Tonantzin, and also the two worlds of the Conquistadoras and Montezuma. And so La Virgen de Guadalupe is pretty much a symbol that you will see in most Mexican households. She's on the right, and she is, embodies the spirit of, she's a saint for poor people. And so she came to be, once the Spaniards arrived here in the Americas, colonized the Americas. And then on the left, we have Tonantzin, who's the original version of Guadalupe, who represents the earth and water and life. And so you can see the differences between these two different worlds. On the left, we also have the eagle and the serpent, which are symbols that you see in the Mexican flag too. And the serpent you'll see continually in all of these murals as a symbol of Quetzalcoatl, or precious and beautiful knowledge. And the serpent is seen as very different from a Western perspective, where serpents are seen as evil and, in the biblical sense. Whereas from an indigenous Mexica perspective, they're seen as very knowledgeable, holding a lot of knowledge, precious and beautiful knowledge, because they're undulating. Their belly is on the earth all the time, so they're undulating on the earth, and so they're feeling and reading and understanding what's happening. And so it's really a different kind of symbol than we're used to in the West. And then here on the far right, we have the three ships that Columbus came in on, that the Spaniards came in on. And then you can also see that there are skulls actually on the sails. So a representation of, not of, some kind of discovery, but rather of bringing colonization, bringing disease. And you can tell it's a very old mural as well. So on the left, we have Zapata. And then in the middle, we have Benito Juarez. And on the right, we have Pancho Villa. And they're all three leaders in different revolutionary times in Mexico. And Benito Juarez is really important. His duality shown there is really important because he was the first indigenous president of Mexico. And so they're showing, sort of this mestizo, mixed race identity. So this mural is of Coyoshaki. And Coyoshaki is representative of the Mexica earth goddess. She is both creation and destruction. So Coyoshaki was the sister of Huitzilopochtli. And when Coyoshaki's mom became pregnant with Huitzilopochtli, she and her sisters, she and her other brothers felt angry about that, and so they attacked their mother and murdered her. And in response, Huitzilopochtli, who has the will to act, he actually dismembered his sister Coyoshaki and then threw her up into the sky. And as a result, she ended up forming the moon. And so when you see this image of her, you can see how she's been dismembered. They're all the different parts of her, but together as a composite, she makes up the moon and the cycles of the moon. And she has that energy of the pulling of the tides and water. And so she's a very powerful entity. And a lot of Chicana feminist theory has really embraced Coyoshaki as looking at these dismembered parts of us, looking at those border spaces, that Nepantla, that space of Nepantla, which is the spaces in between. And Coyoshaki is sort of a representation of how do we name those parts of us and start to put ourselves back together. any sense. And so you can also see that it's been graffitied, which is really sad. A lot of the elders in the community would say, that's a sign of our youth not being connected to their culture and their history, and that's really a sign of a colonized mindset, of internalized oppression, internalized racism, of hating one's own culture. So this mosaic was made by a youth group, Youth Art Collective, and it's representative of the Nauiolin, the Tonale, which is the center of the Aztec calendar. We'll be talking about this and learning about this a lot in class. This is part of the indigenous epistemology that we'll be discovering together, learning about together. And you can see that there are 4 core parts of the middle of the Aztec calendar, and those are the 4 energies or the 4 movements that we'll be discussing in more detail. So in the center, you'll see also, you probably recognize this Aztec calendar center, and there's the sun face with the tongue sticking out. And so from a Western perspective, from the colonizer's perspective, this was always interpreted as the Mexica people sacrificing everybody, and lots of sacrifices and killing. And yes, there were some sacrifices, but it's been completely exaggerated by the colonizers. And what it actually symbolizes is a palabra, right? Or your word, speaking. What is your speaking your truth? Which you can also see in the nopal cactus here on the right. And you can see the symbol of the palabra, which is the swirly symbol in there. That is actually like your spoken word, which is symbolic not just of a literal word, but also, just your integrity, who you are. That's your palabra. And you'll see that symbol throughout Mexica glyphs and in a lot of the art around Tucson. On the edges, you'll also see 2 cards. Those are symbolic of more modern Mexican culture, with the loteria cards. But then the 2 symbols that are on there, I believe the estrella and the la luna, are, again, referring back to the cosmos, which is what we saw on the older mural, was always an inclusion of the cosmos, of the stars, of space, because the Mexica people were very much into astronomy. And if you go to their pyramids in the Yucatan, there are observatories on the top of pyramids, and so they're very connected to astronomy. So this is in downtown Tucson. This is called the Tucson Convention Center, which is being rebuilt again with the addition of a hotel and a parking lot. And this whole area that you see here under construction used to be part of Barrio Viejo, which is one of the oldest barrios in Tucson. And so you can see as we leave the area that the TCC is in, you can see the old historic buildings that are still left, although this area has been very gentrified. And so this whole part where the TCC is was razed, and all of those families were displaced. And since that time, this neighborhood just keeps getting more and more gentrified. The cost keeps going up, and there are very few families who originally lived here in Barrio Viejo. And so people say that the TCC has a curse on it, because it's a convention center and it's never been financially successful. And so now they're pouring all this new money into it and adding onto it and adding a hotel and a parking lot. And so it's just a symbol of the growth that's happening here, and how the original families and the original people of this area are just being pushed out further and further out of the downtown area.
another South Tucson, in the heart of South Tucson mosaic mural that shows a lot of the overlapping identities of people in this area. And so you have a lot of South Tucson pride. South Tucson is its own city, and it, you know, you can really function on this part of the community fully in Spanish if you need to. And so you see, you know, mi barrio, and you have a lot of words in Spanish, as well as native symbols, indigenous symbols, and symbols around gambling and tattoos. And then they're also always, you know, Mexica iconography. So you have a Mexica warrior on the right bottom. You have some of the symbols that we've mentioned before with the palabra along the top, and the roses. So just a really classic Tucson and Mexican mural.
So this mural is at the Paulo Freire Freedom School, and it's really representative of a lot of the work that they've done at this school, but also resembles important parts of Tucson. And so here we have a young, looks like a Chicana, holding a book, and the book is Pedagogy of the Oppressed, which obviously written by Paulo Freire, and this is the Paulo Freire School. But other important images are, you know, the desert background, but over here we have the hummingbird, the huitzilin, and that's representative of the will to act. At the school, they do a lot of project-based learning, and it's very Prescott College-like, but at a middle school level. So they do a lot of field work and have expeditions. And then we also have the jaguar there up on the right corner, or on the left corner. They've included that because of the work that they've done around environmental justice, and specifically around the impacts of the US-Mexico border wall on wildlife. And the jaguar has been one of the animals that has been impacted. And actually the Paulo Freire, I believe it was the 8th graders, actually named the jaguar as a collective. They got the opportunity to come up with the name, which I believe is sombra, which means shadow. And so that's why they included the jaguar there. And so that's just this has been a really important part of our work here too. My daughter went here, and know a lot of the teaching staff who are very connected to Prescott College. And so it's a really beautiful newer mural.